All right, CNT120, Chapter 4. We are moving on to one of our first core protocols here, TCP, Transmission Control Protocol. This is actually working at the transport layer. The TCP protocol really is there to provide reliable data delivery. And to do the reliable data delivery, we're going to show some of the unique aspects of TCP and what it's going to do to get data from A to B reliably. Now, here is just a picture I have. It's not a full picture, but it gives you an idea. TCP, these upper layer protocols here, HTTP, HTTPS, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, File Transfer Protocol, these all use TCP. Because if you think about it, a partial web page is not very useful. A partial email is not very useful. A partial file is not very useful. So these upper layer protocols are going to use TCP to make sure all the data gets from A to B, from sender to receiver. I don't have a choice. This is not something I can go select. This is not a button I can push to change this. It's just by nature, these upper layer protocols, and these are just a sampling, are going to use TCP because it needs all of the stuff to get from A to B for that to be a usable protocol. Okay, and we'll look a little bit later about UDP over here. Here's examples of ones that would use UDP, but we're just going to stick with TCP for now. Now, what makes TCP, the characteristics that make TCP reliable is these things right here. Connection-oriented, sequencing and checksum, and flow control. These are three specific things that TCP does. Well, the connection-oriented is that before data is actually sent, before any data is sent, there's a connection made between sender and receiver of like, hey, I want to get data from you. And the receiver's like, okay, let's do it this way. Sender's like, okay. That setup process gets done before any data is sent. So it's kind of like calling, your friend before you get to the house and saying, are you there? I want to drop by and drop off this thing to you, or drop off the money I owe you. Yeah, I'm here. Come on over. And then you go over to their house. It's kind of the whole making sure they're there and available before you do the transfer. That's TCP is going to do that. It's then going to do sequencing and number everything. It's going to number everything it sends and keeps track of it. Hey, I'm going to send you 10 things. So here's 1 of 10, here's 2 of 10, here's 3 of 10, here's 4 of 10, here's 5 of 10, and that way everything is accounted for and it gets from A to B. But if something goes missing, hey, I didn't get 5 of 10. Well, let me resend it. I didn't get 7 of 10. All right, let me resend it. Everything is numbered so everything can be reliably transferred. And checksums are just that. They're little error checks to see, is everything in hopefully good order. Kind of like, before, if somebody gives you payment for something, you might look across it and go, is that enough? Is everything here? Are you paying for everything before you finish your transaction? That kind of thing. Last one down here is flow control. Flow control is between the sender and receiver. They can adjust how much data is going to get sent per time. Because if you send too much data, it overwhelms the receiver and that data usually gets thrown away. So flow control is a way to either increase how much you're sending per time or decrease how much you're sending per time to make sure the receiver is not overwhelmed. Flow control, we're going to see, happens with sliding windows. Sliding windows is going to do that. My TCP format, if you remember, my upper layer data, my TCP header gets added to it, and that whole thing is called my TCP segment. So my IP packet is basically, my TCP segment as it moves down through the layers. My IP header gets added to that, and now that becomes the data. So this upper layer TCP, when we add the IP header on, all of this TCP becomes the data part for the IP packet, if I think back to my encapsulation process earlier. Here is the TCP header fields. There's a bunch of them, and these are all here and necessary for getting data reliably from A to B. as I go down through it. And we're actually going to look at some of these in a live capture here in a minute. Source and destination port. What is sending this? Usually something from like your browser is sending this. Maybe the request is coming from your browser. Destination port would be going to maybe the web server. So it's cluing in on the service running on that server. Hey, this goes to the web server service running on there. Sequence numbers are to number everything. Keep track of it so we know this is 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10. Acknowledgement numbers are numbers sent back to say, yes, I got 1 to 10, I'm ready for 11. I got 1 to 30, I'm ready for 31. I got 1 to 90, I'm ready for 91. These are acknowledgement numbers to say, I got all this, send more. Flag fields down here. These are used to indicate things like setting up your transfer, and as well as closing down the transfer when we're done too. These are flags to indicate states of this data transfer. Here's your window size. How much data are we going to send per time? And this can be increased or decreased by either end. There's your error check. Okay, and then the data from the upper layer fields, upper layers, if you will. Okay, now before any data is sent, like I'm going to load a web page, before that is done, TCP does what's called a three-way handshake, and that's for the sender and receiver to get synchronized, to get linked up, if you will. So before I actually get the web page from the web server, I kind of knock on the door of the web server saying, hey, I want to get your website. Server's like, okay, well, let's get this transfer organized. And then we go, okay, I think we're organized. Let's do this thing. So this three-way handshake has to get done before any of that data is sent. Here's the example out of the book. Here's my my browser, if you will, talking to the web server. It's like, hey, I would like to synchronize with you to get your website. So my sequence number, this is really, think of this as like the odometer in your car, but like for data bytes. Okay, so it's going to continually increase the more I send. It's just going to keep going up. So I'm going to start off and send to the server like, hey, my data byte counter, my sequence number, my data byte counter is at this number. So anything from here on out is going to start at this number and go up. So I send that to the server. The server now is like, okay, dude, I got it. I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to acknowledge that your counter is that, and I'm going to expect from you one number higher when you send something next, 559, one number higher. And it goes, oh, by the way, you probably want to know my byte counter, my odometer in my car, my byte counter. You might want to know that I'm starting at, 669 here. So my laptop here gets that and goes, oh, okay, so the next thing you're going to send to me is 670. And again, this is a way to know where we're starting and what's coming next, what is being sent next. And then here, this indicates, my sender indicates I started at 558. My next byte is now going to go up to 559. I'm seeing that increase, if you will. So we basically exchange these, our byte counters, if you will. Again, I like to think of them as odometer readings in my car, mileometer readings in my car. Now that we've exchanged those, when we send data back and forth, we can reference them by number now. Because we now know, the server now knows my numbering, and I happen to know its numbering now, the server's numbering. So we can now start referring to every single byte of like, hey, I got 559, I'm ready for 560. I got 560, I'm ready for 561 kind of thing. We can now account for every single byte that we're sending back and forth. That's what the three-way handshake is going to do. Here's an example of a TCP segment, TCP header from an actual capture. I think this is out of our book. I'm going to show you a real one, though. I'm going to show you a real one. And then, again, here is my header fields again, given some breakdown of those. All right, so let's take a look at a TCP, hopefully three-way handshake, and see this happening. So I'm going to load Wireshark. That's my packet capture tool. I'm going to try to fit it into my my window here. And I'm going to start capturing data on my wireless NIC here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start the capture, and this is going to make a copy of every piece of data coming and going on my computer. I'm going to load a web page that I haven't been to yet today, and hopefully capture this process, and then take a look at these packets. So let me start this. I'm going to open my browser back here. I'm going to open up, I have not been to Formula One, believe it or not, Formula One .com website today, so I'm going to try to open that, and hopefully I'm hoping to have captured that in my Wireshark back here. So let me do this, and I will stop my capture. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for DNS. DNS allows me to see, this is kind of I've requested the website, it's going to give me information back. So I'm going to see if I can find Formula1.com loading over here, over in this window, over in this section over here. I'm hoping I can find that. If not, I might have to do a new web page, because sometimes it gets hard to find. So let me see what we can find here. Oh, here we go. Here's Formula1.com. Excellent. So there is me requesting the address for Formula1.com. I sent my request to a DNS server, and the DNS server responded back to me. My request was, if I take a look here real quick, I'm like, hey, does anybody know the address of Formula1.com? And the DNS server responds with, hey, the address is one of these, 99 blah, 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 75 blah, blah, blah. Okay, now that I have that info, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here at packet 296. And I'm going to try to find somewhere near 296 me talking to a 99 website. There's me talking to that 99 website. Okay, so I'm going to try here to do, I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to go follow TCP stream. And what that's hopefully going to do is filter out anything else that happened to be going on. So here hopefully is me talking to the web server to me talking to web server. There it is. Excellent. So if I take a look here, I have me talking to the web server. I'm going to open the TCP header. So let's make this a little bit larger. This is me coming from my browser talking to the web server port 80. That's the destination. That's the service running. That's the web server service running on the web server. That's what 80 is. In here, if I look, these are relative sequence numbers. So it's basically, hey, you're starting at 0 in your transfer. It's really this number, but Wireshark made it easy saying, hey, you're starting at 0. Down here in the flags field, we see the synchronization bit set. This is me trying to synchronize with the web server. And right here is my window saying, hey, I can send 64,000 bytes at a time before an acknowledgement. Well, if I look at the next TCP chunk up here, this is the web server talking to me, coming from port 80 from the web server to me in my browser tab, if you will. It's like, hey, my sequence number is 0. It's really this, but it's like, hey, I'm starting at 0. I acknowledge yours. I acknowledge what you sent me as 0, and I'm expecting 1 from you next. Again, here's the real acknowledgement. And it goes, hey, I'm acknowledging what you sent me, and by the way, I'm sending you my synchronization. I'm sending you my byte counter. And it goes, hey, I'm not too busy. Let's send 65,000 bytes at a time. So the next one here is me talking again to the web server. Again, here is my port basically in my browser going to the web server service. My sequence number increased to 1 now. That's the next byte of data I sent. And I'm acknowledging that they sent me theirs. They sent me their sequence number, so there's my acknowledgement, if you will. And I'm sending an acknowledgement flag. I'm acknowledging what you sent me. And I drop my window size down because at this point in time I happen to be busy. But this three-way handshake is me talking to that server, setting up this data transfer. The next packets in here, if I get rid of my filter, would be me getting the web page from the web server. Now, this happens every single time I want any kind of reliable data transfer. Every time I click a web page, every time I download a file, every time I send an email. This is happening in the background to make sure all of this stuff, all the data gets from A to B, from sender to receiver. And if anything goes missing, we can request it, fill it in, and now have a complete data transfer. So there, real quickly, is TCP.